Hi guys, welcome to the Voice of AI Academy. My name is Hugo, and today I'm going to show you my research into my first PC. I've selected all the parts and got some consulting from my mentor, and now I am ready to order the components and start the building process. But before that, let's take a look at the research I've done on the motherboard, central processing unit, graphics processing unit, the random access memory, the solid state drive, and the case, the power supply, and the cooling. Okay guys, so now I have the Excel spreadsheet open for where I've done most of my research. So as you can see, we have the CPUs, GPUs, motherboard, memory, SSD, power supply, CPU cooler for the computer, so those are like the fans in general, and the case. Case usually comes with some fans as well. When I first started research, I was completely lost. I didn't really know much about anything. I watched YouTube videos and they really help. So when you're just starting out, it's great to watch some tutorial videos just to gain some knowledge on the topic. For instance, in one video, there was some information on mid-tier gear for the PC, and then like the high tier, which is in like 4K. Mid-tier is around 1440p, whilst 1080p is kind of the low-end PCs, which surprised me at first because when I was on my iPad, the best I ever got was 1080p. So when I was seeing these big numbers, I was like, wow. When I was Googling CPUs, the main two CPUs that ever came up were AMD Ryzen, and Intel cores. The Intel Core i3 and the Intel Core i5 seem to have been a very good bet from older ages, but Ryzen also started back then, and it seems that the Ryzen 7s and 9s are really good, and you probably don't want to go any lower than that, Ryzens. If you want to spend your budget to be around about 1,000, then you probably don't want to go for Ryzens. However, they are best for gaming PCs. When you're looking for the Intel Core, as you can see, they're quite less expensive. KF i5 is still a very good, solid option, giving you around 1440p, or generally just 1080p. So with the Intel Core i5, I was watching combo videos and seeing that these Radeon AMD RX 6950 XT worked really well in combination with Intel. So all Radeon stuff worked really well, and even here for the Ryzen 7. So next, of course, what you have to consider whilst picking CPU and GPU components is a motherboard that will fit it. And nowadays, there's a term called DDR5 and DDR4, and you must really think about this carefully between the more expensive option, the DDR5 or the DDR4, and see what sort of motherboard you want to get. Most motherboards are compatible with Intel or Ryzen, but you just have to make sure and check. Usually GPUs are also fine. And so for the next thing that you would want to really be looking at after you've seen the Intel Core i5 is seeing whether you can go up. The second best option would be the Intel Core i7. It's a very good, solid option. It's not too expensive. It's a very good CPU, and it will definitely do you well. But if you're looking for more of a gaming perspective, as I was, Ryzen 7 seems to be the best option out there. Also, what a solid option is the i9 Intel Core or the Ryzen 9. Let's just have a quick look at some of the cores that we can see here. I made a few links. So for instance, the Intel Core i7, we have the box here, but it doesn't really show exactly how the chip looks like. But as you can see here, you can see the clock speeds, and you can see the amount of wattage you can take up, and the processor count, obviously. So with this, you can kind of deduce like how good it is, but mainly YouTube videos give you really that top information. If you're looking for what exactly Intel Core i7 looks like, yeah, precisely. So this would be the back of the Intel Core. This is the 9th gen. These on the back go onto the motherboard. Because CPUs are very hot, you need coolers, and you need to find a compatible cooler with your Intel or Ryzen CPU. Most of the time, that is the least of your concerns, as picking out the GPU and CPU and the motherboard is the hardest choice of all. Now, let's see the differences between DDR4 and DDR5 memory. So really, in my opinion, the difference isn't that great. Of course, the price is definitely that great, but when you're thinking about just a simple PC, you don't really need that DDR5 that's been out there. DDR4 is perfectly suitable for slightly mid-range PCs. If you want the high-end stuff, the crisp 4K, beautiful stuff, go ahead. I'm not stopping you. But make sure when you are figuring out your motherboard to know whether it's DDR5 or DDR4. Because when you're looking for the memory, you have to be really careful that the memory is compatible with DDR5 or DDR4. As you can see, after looking through this, I went over to a different one and just had a look at a DDR4 motherboard. And you can see that this PNY XLR8 32GB 2 sticks of 16 gigs, they are suitable for DDR4, but they aren't suitable for DDR5. In my opinion, the best ones for DDR5, if you can see here, I chose later on, I'll go to this later, is the Corsair Vengeance. Of course, this is for DDR4, but there is also a certain type that's compatible with DDR5, and that type of memory is probably the best you can get. Next up, we looked at SSD, probably the easiest, quickest thing you can find. Basically, that is everything that you could possibly need. Of course, you need to have a look at how much it costs, how much the 1 terabyte, how much the 2 terabyte costs. And as you can see, it's quite funny. I was looking at this earlier. The cost here, $169, but when we go to the 2 terabyte, it actually less. So I thought that was just quite funny. So next up, we have the power. That is something I was also confused on because I didn't really look so much into it. I was mainly looking for my GPUs and Intel cores. I was talking with my mentor about what supplies you should get. I wasn't really sure about anything. And he said anything between 400 and 450 watts is good. But if you want that extra power, make sure that all your stuff runs well and won't ever crash or anything, then to just go that extra mile to be sure and certain. He suggested the Gigabyte. They are best in this area, the power. And then also, I'd like to bring your attention to here. This is probably what I would have chosen before talking with my friends and then my mentor later. I was thinking of getting the Intel Core i7 and the GeForce RTX 4070. Now, I'll come back later to this GPU as I feel like NVIDIA is very complex. So with this, I've managed to find this motherboard. It was compatible, but it was for Intel, as you can see right there. But this motherboard seems to do a great job, has all the ports, as you can see. This motherboard would work well with Intel if you were ever having a look and you thought if you wanted to use this potentially. So motherboard here works really well with the Intel Core. And so with this, I also found some RAM that was compatible with DDR4. It's this. I'll just give you a quick look. Some RGB, but that's not really the main topic here. We're just seeing that it has 32 gigabytes of data. Usually, if you are a gamer, 64 gigabytes is very good. Most people say it's even too good. But I believe that if you're getting some memory, at least two 16 gigs is good to get to a total of 35 gigs. The best, obviously, being two 32 gigabyte sticks of RAM. Next up, I just wanted to draw your attention to the fan here. I have a CPU cooler. So with this fan, as you can see, this section here is put onto the CPU, and what that does is it absorbs the heat basically and transfers it up into the metal behind. As you can see kind of here, it's not a very good photo. I think I have a better one. we look here, yeah, we can see really perfectly well the grating and the stuff is connected to, which takes the heat, and the fans then cool that, and then there's a constant cycle of cooling for the CPU. But next up, after talking with my friends about the i5 core, I realized that it's quite behind time, and the Intel Core i7 is actually a much better option if I want to do gaming or just even schoolwork in general. Intel Core i7 was suggested by my friends as they also had Intel cores. And so this is what I did the day before going to my mentor. This was the second day of research. This was just an evenings of research, basically an entire day just doing this. And then second day is on this and this stuff. And the third day is finishing it all up. So what did I learn? Basically, what you have to really be certain of is to figure out a great CPU and GPU. After you've figured out those two, you have to figure out the motherboard that's compatible with both of them. And once you've done that, you need to know if the motherboard is DDR4, DDR5, get the RAM, the correct RAM for each of either DDR4 or DDR5. Have an SSD, quickest and easiest job. Make sure to get a power supply. Usually Gigabyte supplies the pretty good, as my mentor suggested. Then you need the CPU cooler, and of course, lastly, the case, and I'm just getting to that right now. So Lian Li is a very good case. I do not have one right here, but that was my original thoughts because I saw it in many YouTube videos. And I was thinking, oh, it seems like a nice case, but when I was looking at the measurements, which is really important to also look at when choosing all of your items, is to make sure that choose the correct parameters, or just measurement has to be all the same for each. The measurement has to basically match the motherboard. The motherboard has the core and the graphics card on it, and you also have to be careful about the sizes of the graphics card because they're usually quite big. And then because I saw those measurements, I realized that the Lian Li case would actually be potentially too small, and I wouldn't want to risk it. So when I was using another website called Build Redux, this website is quite interesting. As you can see, it's a quick and easy build your PC website. This actually didn't really help me, but it did tell me the FPS for Minecraft, the one game I really wanted to play. So so after knowing, like, for instance, these games, all these games, seeing what sort of stuff we have here and what sort of FPS we would need for a PC, it's just better for us. So we go and we press next, and then we go and see what it suggests, and we can see it suggests an Intel Core i5, which is still low, so that's why I suggest to get the i7 if you're going for something like this. And as we can see, the case, now this quite quickly caught my attention. It's quite a looker, and of course the rest of the stuff here showed us a NVIDIA 4070, which is also quite interesting. But when you look at the best, then it goes really quite high in price, 2,500. And you see, even though it's 2,500, I managed to have my costs less as I did my research by myself and not just using simple application. I made sure to do the research and just be able to understand my computer. I feel like that way I'll be able to learn, and that way I understand everything in my computer and I won't be lost when something goes wrong. I will have no idea how to fix it or anything. So this way, I learned everything. So next up, after talking with my friends who also have PCs, they suggested GeForce. Now, NVIDIA, very interesting topic here of the gaming hardware. We have the GPUs. Now, when you're looking at a gaming computer, you really want to look at the GPU because the GPU renders all the lighting and all this RTX stuff, right? And because of this, hold on, maybe I can get you a quick example of the best graphics card at the moment, the RTX 4090. Of course, I think this is still way too expensive for needing to be purchased. And now, as we can see, we have the, here we go. So this right here, this is the RTX ray tracing. And as you can see on the left here, we have the RTX off, but with it on, you can see that lighting is rendered without, it's not really, see the difference here. This is Portal 2, I believe, or something like that. You see even on the ground right there's no lighting of the portal that's from here, right? So all this stuff, the GPU renders and the CPU just does a small calculations and processes many times a second. Without both of them, you can't play any games, really. So, as we can tell from many YouTube videos, if you watch them, you can tell that there's so much going on in the GPU world, even including with the Radeon. I think Radeon's a very good starter sort of PC for low ends or even middle ends. But if you want that higher end, I think NVIDIA would be, I think, more than enough. So when I was looking through the products, you have to make sure you really understand that the 40 series doesn't necessarily mean because it's the latest, it's the best, which really is the most important key to understanding this. The RTX 30 series is probably the most popular. That's when NVIDIA started to be the best of the best. So the clock speeds are here and everything. They're all very similar for the 30s. And that's fine. These speeds are very high indeed, gigahertz measured in. NVIDIA cores, right? So the GeForce 3090 has many cores, and so do the rest of them. The only problem is with the 30s, they are actually better than what they should be. So the prices of them are actually higher than some of the 40 series, which is quite shocking, really, if you're looking at it for the first time. I was quite surprised seeing the 4090 starting at $1,540 being so expensive, even though most experts say that it should be less. But of course, the prices are around 150, 300% higher, and now they are slowly getting lower and lower back to the what it should cost price. So with this in mind, I was looking at the 4070. Now, the 4070 Ti was originally called the 4080, and there was some backlash by the community for NVIDIA for releasing such a basically really bad GPU for an extremely high price. And so they named it then the 4070 Ti and knocked off 100 euros or dollars from the price. As you can see here, we can see that it has cutting edge technology, ray tracing cores, low latency. But this is basically what every GPU should have, right? And as we can tell, 4070 runs most of these really well. So even if we were to get slightly better 4070 Ti, the price isn't really worth it. So what my thought process was the 4070. So in the end, I decided on the 4070. Now, after talking with my mentor, here's where some quite big changes occurred. He told me that if I wanted a gaming PC, I should really be looking at the Ryzen 7 7000 series. And I think this is a good shout. So if you are looking for a gaming PC, then the AMD Ryzen 7800 X3D should be just perfect, like very good, okay? Intel i7, I think, still would suffice. So as we can see, we have this as a very good option for gaming, and this probably just for general use is a good CPU to have good tab openings and just everything to run multitasking well and that. But when you're looking for gaming, he suggested this. So I looked up Ryzen and found this information. It does overclocking the same as the Intel. Basically, overclocking is where you have a limited clock speed, runs the speed. and you can put it to its max performance at the cost of really nothing. So looking here, we can see we don't have a cooler, so that also can tell us that we need to buy a cooler for the CPU. And we can see that it has AM5 capacity, socket AMD AM5 capacity, meaning that it connects to anything with a motherboard of sockets AM5 or even AM4. So, okay, so now I'll go into the final day of where I was talking with my mentor. Originally, I was debating between these two for the end run, and I ended up with the Asus TUF X570. So we can see these 4 strips here. We can see these 4 RAM sockets. And basically, what these are for is for the memory sticks. You'd push these little things to the side and put in your RAM in the dual channels. Make sure they're in the same colored one, kind of. Basically just one apart from each other. Unless you have all 4 sticks, then it's completely fine to put them in everything. And then we find this place here is for Ethernet. You can see it from the side. We have HDMI, USB, but we also have this. You see these 3 screws. This one, or sorry, well, not 3, but this 1, 2, 3, 4, and this little thing here. You can see on the left-hand side of my screen. So this, and this. That is where we would put in our SSD on the motherboard. Obviously, here we would put the CPU. After figuring out the CPU, the GPU, the motherboard, and the RAM and SSD for it, we then had to figure out the CPU cooler and the fans and the case. Obviously, we kept the power supply from beforehand. So I decided on the Noctua NHD15. This beating the Kraken in performance. So the Krakens are supporting the more RGB side of CPU coolers. So they have like a cooler looking stuff, but I think performance beats colors, at least in this case. Radiators are also interesting to consider. Right now, I haven't added one into this list, as my mentor said he doubts it will be necessary. If you're wondering what a radiator is, it is not a heating device, as you may think, as you want to have as the one you have in your home, but it is actually a water cooler that you can put on the side of your case somewhere, and when airflow works, it will just cool up the air inside your case. And of course, considering airflow, the blue arrows indicating the intake from these fans, this is the cold air from outside, whereas the red arrows are the heated air from the components that are very hot and are being cooled by this air. They are leaving the PC case through these fans here, and this state here is a neutral state of airflow, which basically means that the amount of intake is the same as the amount of airflow leaving the case. Next up, we have the 3 different types of airflow. I already talked about the natural state, which is the second best state, positive being the best and negative the worst. This is because the intake is less than the airflow out of the case, leading to dust particles entering through the mesh due to air being forced into the case by lack of intake to extreme air out. The positive is best because no dust can enter, as it is not forced into the case. We have to consider, finally, if it all fits in the case. And now I managed to find a case. As we know from beforehand, this fits all the parts neatly well. We didn't have to look for any others as they were in my region. But yeah, so basically what you have to consider when you're buying is the quality, the price, whether you can actually get it in your region, and of course the budget, because in the end, you always go over the budget. Originally, I thought it might be around, let's say, 1,000, 1,500, but in the end, it was around 2,000. So, as you can see, we're never perfect, but we managed to pick out some pretty good stuff. I mean, pretty good stuff, actually pretty great and awesome stuff for the PC. And we also have some extra fans here that should just lighten up the PC with some RGB and also a little bit more cooling for the motherboard, CPU, RAM, and all of that good stuff. So in the end, this was my final pick with a total cost of €2,057. A quick side note here, this is a new day as well. I had to change out a few things. As you can see here, I had to change out the motherboard. So the problem here was that my CPU that I decided that I wanted to get, well, it just simply wasn't compatible with the old one. The old one was AM4. Now, originally, I didn't really understand the meaning of this, but now that I do, I'm going to bring this up. So AM4 and DDR4 are basically just a series that work with not AMD Ryzen 7000 series. I think they work with 5 and Intel fine, but just not with the Ryzen 7000 series. So that was a minor problem. Well, it wasn't very minor, but I did have to change out the motherboard. And because I had to change out the motherboard, I also had to change out the RAM. So the DDR4 RAM that I originally had, well, I had to change that. So here we have a few of the products from Corsair Vengeance. Mine is probably sold out, so it's not on this page, but mine was the 6,600 megahertz CL40, I believe. After changing out the RAM, I ordered them both, and now I'm just waiting until they both arrive. Only other thing I missed out in this video was the fact that I changed this SSD to this one. I didn't mention it, but I do change it to this one. Only reason being, I wasn't sure about the branding on this one. I just wanted to be 100% sure that I knew it was, a secure solid state drive. I think it would have been fine. And I think if you want to go for this one, that's quite high price, but it's definitely a good one. Go ahead. I just chose the PNY as there are a few more products on this as well. Obviously, it's actually lower quality than the other one. It's only 2,100 Mbps, whilst this one is 7,500. But I think downloading games slightly faster doesn't make too much of a difference in my opinion. Here we have the P650B gigabyte power supply, 650 watts. And yes, this is more than enough to supply all of your pieces. I did a few calculations here, and as you can see, I have a bunch of wattage space. So in the end, be careful when choosing. Of course, I was as careful as possible, but I even made a few mistakes. But yeah, in the end, I had to choose AM5, DDR5, out of the old DDR4, AM4 to support this new Ryzen 7. So hopefully everything should fit. That's all from the Voice of AI Academy. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks, and I'll see you all later.